Hello guys, welcome to the Trading Parrot. Out of almost 1.6 billion in liquidations, 1.4 were just longs last night. And that's pretty significant. Some people in comments on YouTube and on my Telegram channel are starting to speculate that actually that is something bullish. And yes, we lost the 4-hour time frame. Yesterday, we went all the way to RSI 35 and bounce off it. We'll talk about that in detail. We're gonna have to redraw all the lines around here because everything changed yesterday pretty much when it comes to the 4-hour time frame. We're gonna look at the daily. There is some sort of microscopic breakdown on the daily, so we need to talk about that as well. And for that, we are going to have to use liquidation pools and the order book, particularly the order book, to understand what really is the market maker trying to do here. And I promise you that once you see that data, you're gonna be angry at the market maker if you were one of those longs and you got your stop loss hit overnight, because it's really dodgy what they're trying to do. Guys, if you like this type of content, make sure that you're subscribed to the channel, hit the notification bell to get notified every time I put out one of these videos. And I'm sorry about yesterday's altcoin video. My MacBook M1 Max with 64 gigs of RAM is not being able to deal with so many tabs and so many charts at the same time, opening a single window, capturing that and doing all the processing. I know, I should probably get an M4 or maybe go to Windows, whatever. I'll think about that later. At the moment, I'm just crossing my fingers that this video is not gonna have any issues. It's incredible the open interest, how similar it looks to this move in March. You can see the impulsive move to 20 billion, an initial retracement, then a lower high, just like what we are doing in here, but in this case, instead of 21 billion, it's 32 billion. But the same moves, pretty much the same kind of shape of the first low and the same kind of shape of the first lower high. So we'll see for how long we continue on this, but you can see that after the third lower high, that's when you get the first big flash of open interest. So I'm hoping we are not gonna need to get there. Just a heads up. Tomorrow is Wednesday and there is core inflation rate reports, with the exception of the inflation rate that is expected to increase just 1 point. All the rest of the forecasts are just to stay flat. So I suspect that a lot of the moves that we are currently having in the market have to do with speculation based on what are we gonna get tomorrow and how is that gonna affect interest rates, balance sheet, and all of that. You can see December hasn't moved that much. We are just less than 1% away from the initial price. And going into the charts, we said yesterday that the best thing that we could do will be to put a green candle and break above the 101k to put a high. But I guess as a compromise, since we are still not there with the report tomorrow, has been so far to just hold the trend line, which yesterday I call out at 97.5, but indeed placing correctly the trend line and looking with a magnifier glass, I can see that is at 97.2. Now starting the day from below the trend line as a consequence of being so close to it and now being slightly above it at 97.8 could be a bounce of support. There is a chance that that is what we are doing, and we need to really be going next into the 4-hour time frame to see if we have any hope of that. What do we need to see on the 4-hour to confirm it? And with this move that we did yesterday, you can see that if we consider this a bounce of support, which is not confirmed, because if today this so far green candle ends up closing below 97.2, then we confirm a breakdown as well. That's how a daily candle is supposed to work. In either case, whether we bounce of support or we break down below support, that is already away from what we did in 2020. If you look at the right hand side, we only bounced 3 times. After that, we were creeping up towards the 20k, which is kind of the old version of the 100k. And this year, we closed above 100k with a daily candle. We saw a rejection. Now we are finding support so far for the intra-candle day, and that is very interesting and is one of the reasons we should be paying attention at the charts and the reaction to these upcoming events. Going into the 4 hour, of course, the reaction is a lot more magnified. Indeed, as I mentioned in the video yesterday, an interesting area for buying an opportunity where these two order blocks coming from price action concepts from Lux Algo, which is basically taking the volume in here and calculating that in here there was a lot of buying, a lot of volume, exchange of hands, if you want. Yesterday we have a very aggressive move when we went to 94K. You can see here in the 1 minute chart how much volume this generated. I suspect that there was a big liquidation. That's the only way that you can explain these moves in just a few minutes, moving over $2,000 Bitcoin. That repeat once again, putting a higher high on the 1 minute, and then it continue moving to the upside. And again in here at 23:22, almost midnight, another big move of volume. Going back into the price action, you can see that we lost on the 4 hour the support of this ascending trend line in here, and currently we're battling with it. We could say that the resistance now is 97.6 to 98.2. That chunk in there is definitely the resistance that is preventing us from reclaiming the same range above the trend line. And when I mean let's look at the 4 hour, what I just say in the previous chart, I mean what do we do with this resistance? Claiming the previous range above 98.2 will be extremely bullish, and it will make all this 4 hour action just look at like a liquidity hunt for potential upside, breaking above this trend line that we haven't been able to break since we went to 104K. Notice as well that we had this low and then a lower low, but now we have a higher low. So if this point of resistance that we are talking about manage to kick back down the price, I suspect that we could potentially do a journey into below 90s. That is based on a full rejection in here, putting a new low, for example, closing a 4 hour candle closer to 96K, because we have used now most of the liquidity. I'm going to show you the ask and bid liquidity action in here, and you're going to be able to confirm how much of all those orders got fills, which means that that buying power has been already used, and we need to cross fingers that now bulls are going to step in with the next resistance and continue to the upside. But if that is not the case, many of them are going to say, okay, that's it, let's close the long and let's let the price dump to the next level, which in theory should be a lower low from here, because in here there are big liquidations, and in that case many shorts might decide to enter in here and target it too. So be aware of those two scenarios. Scenario number 1, rejection to re-enter the previous range. Scenario number 2, we reclaim and close above it and we start hitting the shorts. Notice that that price action may not happen today because we have the event tomorrow. So it all depends on what is the sentiment overall among investors of expectations from this meeting to think whether A or B is going to succeed. But in some cases there is indecision and the price remains flat up until the event, and then on the event you start seeing the volatility, and sometimes volatility happens with a rally or a dump prior to the event, and then in the event things reverse. So be careful with the volatility towards the event, which has already started yesterday. And let's look at the 4 hour, because I promise that we are going to do a full reshape of the 4 hour. We need to do a cleanup and an update. So I'm gonna do it as I'm recording the video so you can understand why I'm moving all the lines. Remember, we called this a global breakout. We went above it. Now we are kind of below it and above it all the time. So let's move the global towards this line and let's call this the global resistance. This orange line, we don't need it anymore. We can still use the global support on the 4 hour that is at the moment at 35. And I'm going to hide Lux Algo and bring in RSI reverse so we can look at those levels that we talk about. We got the support at 36, we got the resistance at 72, and we're gonna need a local resistance. And for that, I'm gonna use this line and I'm gonna place it like this, and I'm gonna use white color so we can see it at all times. Remember that my charts are available in my website so you can see them at all times as I'm updating these lines throughout the day. The link is in the the description. If you cannot find it, it's thetradingparrot.com/charts. There is indeed 64 charts which constitute the full tool set that we review in the videos every day. There are some paid tools that if you decide, you can also get discounts to use them. But with TradingView, pretty much you can access everything. And with the free tier Picnic on the website, you can also access most of the indicators that I have for free. Some of them are VIP, of course. All right, so the local resistance is at 52 at the moment. I'm just speculating that at that point we might meet the line, but that's not necessarily truth. I'm just speculating because this could be later at 47. It could be way later at 40. That's why every day we look at what's going on. At this point, I feel like the most likely point of contact is 51, so I'm gonna change it in here. And now we can hide the RSI and we can do the analysis in here. Just as a reminder, here are the resistance lines from the trend line from price action concepts Lux Algo. Let's remove it to just focus on the RSI lines. So as you can see, yesterday we hit the red support line. And indeed, we went beyond up until 94K, but we managed to close above the red, but still we lost the white. That white resistance at the moment is 98.7. And I think it's mandatory in here to have a breakout in here to start talking about those targets above 100K, which in this case is located at 105.5. There is a double bottom formation in here, and this may rally against resistance and potentially see another rejection and maybe another bottom information, and then we see the breakout later. And I'm pretty sure that many people are going to enter or have already entered on a long at the red support. We shared yesterday those levels in the video, and we say that support was at 96K. I hope that you didn't put the stop loss at 95.9 because obviously you enter, you get immediately stop out. The previous low was 90K, 90.5. So depending on your trading style, how much leverage you use, how much can you afford to lose. If you use a decent placement of the stop loss, you should be now in profit around a 2%, but now hitting resistance and having the questioning of whether we are going to manage to break above it, or if you're just going to take profits in here and potentially even enter in a short, targeting that lower low on the next order block. Those are the opportunities. Let's look at what the daily has to say. I think that is also very important. You can see that this is the channel from August. I published an update yesterday on my Telegram, Instagram, and Twitter, making sure that you were aware that we were testing support on the daily. And this is a support that we have held so far for 126 days. So it's pretty significant. The only problem is that the breakdown is very humble. This is a breakdown of 0.46 RSI value, not even 1 point of breakdown. You can see in here we met with support, and even that was larger with 1.24 points away from the support. So if we are going to be millimetrically calling for a breakdown at this point, I think that is a little bit wrong. Sure, we can still continue going lower, even if we say we haven't had the breakdown. You can see that the red candle closed below our white line that represents that support coming from the RSI, and the breakdown was for just roughly $400. But we are still being held by the upward sloping trend line, and now we are testing the RSI as resistance, but with a very, very small move in here. So I think there is no decision yet on this. It's just too small the movement to really say something. If yesterday we broke down and we had something like this, it's absolutely evident. Or if we hit somewhere near support and we bounce off aggressively again, but just being there, it seems like we are still deciding what to do based on what happens tomorrow. That is my perception. And that's why I will roll back to the 4 hour and use this to decide we continue going higher, we break above resistance, or we see rejection and we go in this way. The daily is just saying we are still at support. Wells on Big Well Explorer haven't done anything significant. you can see that both outflows and inflows have reduced, and there seems to be now just a climate of observing what comes next. Yesterday inflows were positive, so ETFs are happy with the belly full, still on extreme greed. Long-term holders, as you can see, they dump Bitcoin, they sell it to short-term holders every time we go to 100k above it, but as soon as it comes down and it reaches 94k, they don't sell anymore. They really want to sell higher. That is my perception. Yesterday in the video in the evening, we talked about this liquidation that was already gone, and when we were recording, that was roughly around here, and we were talking about this liquidity and this very small liquidity there as potential targets to hit next. We also mentioned that below that, below 94k, there is a huge vacuum of liquidity up until 90. So either we just take that and we start forming bottom formations, like so far this one, which is on the 15 minutes only, is not like a 4-hour double bottom, but it could give some upside somewhere in here. If you wonder if there's a lot of liquidity here, there isn't really. You can see that these blue levels from shorts are starting to pile up. It starts becoming green, but over 101k. And it becomes seriously heavy once you reach above 103k. So for continuing with the dump, really price needs to go to 90k, 89 and 88 to really have some motivation to make such a large move, which from where we are, it really needs to move 9k or more to the downside. To the upside, it can just make half of that move or less to hit red. And on the long-term liquidity, you can see that there is a lot more above the price than that 89, which is just starting to get red. You can see the breakdown in here from the pattern. I suspected that these two moves above the trend line were liquidity hunts, and here you can see precisely what we mean by a liquidity hunt. Is a breakout? Yes, this looks like a breakout, and probably it trapped loads of longs, and those longs got liquidated in here with their stop losses. A very quick move, and hopefully if we manage to break above the trend line that we talk about from Lux Algo and continue to the upside, this will also become a liquidity hunt. Of course, if we see a rejection, then it's not a liquidity hunt, and maybe that is the best point to short. So we can go up and we can go down. What is the point of watching this video? The point of watching this video is that you pay attention to the 4-hour, you look at the levels that confirm either direction, and you trade with discipline and proper risk management based on whichever outcome ends up triggering. So far, we are challenging that resistance, but nothing conclusive comes from this yet. So you still have time to look at this, prepare your plan, decide where to put your stop losses, and pick one side based on the conclusiveness of this outcome. I guess, and I hope that makes it a bit more clear for the people constantly commenting about why we envision two potential outcomes every time we trade, and why we don't just use a crystal ball and tell everybody buy, sell. There's plenty of channels for that. I'm sure you will find one that fits the bill for you. Alright, so let's look at the ask and bid liquidity. Very interesting things I'm seeing in here, particularly focusing on all the bid liquidity that enter at 94k. And here is where I find this very disgusting, because after having done all this liquidity hunt, the whales were really interested in entering at the 94k and slightly above it. And that's why we are seeing on the 1 hour as well some bottom information. They feel their backs in here and they have already stop with the bidding. You can see that it's coming down, and that is because those orders have already been executed. Now it becomes just a matter of when the ask liquidity starts coming at the levels of now resistance, whether they win or not. Remember, there's nothing conclusive, and it will really depend on how red we enter in here, if they can take all this long liquidity, outpace it, and create an imbalance that ends up putting the price going down. As simple as that. Liquidation levels are still balanced towards liquidating shorts, which is another checkbox positive for the longs for potential additional upside. You cannot trade that by itself, but it could help in your list of arguments once we start seeing that breakout and reclaiming the previous range on the 4 hour as your ally to have more confidence on taking that long. And something that is really crazy is yesterday we look at the order book. If you remember by my video in the morning morning and in the evening, there was nothing holding the price. And what I said is, if there is interest, they're gonna come at the last minute and place some market orders to buy, because there is not much. There were like 40 million at some point at the low 90s. And you can see that during the day, roughly at 2 p.m. UTC, they placed $126 million on Binance to buy the dip at 95K. So pretty much all the selling pressure at the 100K, more or less like 70% of that liquidity, as soon as we reach 95, step in aggressively there. For example, here on January 21st of 2024, we had 93 million in buying pressure before we made a move from 37 to 73. At that point, there was way less liquidity. We have to admit that. In here, there were 55 million to push the price from 57 back into above 70. And the beginning of this rally started with 51 million when we were at 49K. This buying pressure there, being 124 million, is pretty substantial, guys, and I'm not sure 100% if all of that got executed. Looking at the daily, you can see in here there was 15 million when the price came in there. After that, after hitting 94 or somewhere around here, you can see that they started bidding with 115. Thanks to the bounce in here, they say, okay, we are gonna buy 95, but I don't think it got executed with that amount. It's just that somehow they got bullish, or it's just to manipulate people, making them think that we won't break below 95. I don't know, but now you know that is there for whatever reason it might be. Liquidations. This morning, we had this bubble of liquidation, and I hope the size of the bubble is gonna help you understand how big it is relative to previous long liquidations. And I will say that it's a pretty standard liquidation. If we take the range from July until today, how big is that? We can also use this liquidation measurement tool. Remember, I was speculating we were gonna get a liquidation of this size. I think I went a little bit exaggerated with 910. Yesterday liquidation was 300. And if we look up until July, pretty much all long liquidations in this range have been roughly around 300 on Binance. Only in July, in the middle of summer, which is typically bearish, we have a liquidation of 737, and this red liquidation you can see in here was 1600, and that was shorts that trigger when we cross above 75, 76K. We were waiting for that liquidation for 8 months, so every time I see this bubble, I kind of start mouth watering or getting excited. We are still in the channel to the downside with longs versus shorts. There is still a balance in here of longs versus shorts, but slightly balanced towards too many shorts. If we look at these levels, we used those levels before to continue a rally, like around here at 7,600, 6,700. Now we are at 6,700, but we are halfway towards the lower range, assuming we are in a descending channel. You can see how the longs step in at 95K in here with the liquidity on Binance, but really what they're looking forward is 90 towards 89, which there are plenty of levels expecting to buy that if we got that lower low that we were talking about. So if there is a failure in here against the VWAP that starts from Monday, that is where they're wanting to re-enter. Liquidations of the last 30 months, we have on the upside 104K, but 93 and 89 are the largest ones on the downside as well. We got some new fair value gaps spanning towards 98.6. If we were to do some sort of fake out today and just hit that fair value gap and then continue into the downside, that is another possible outcome based on this fair value gap. That is also based on this level of support and resistance that we were holding the previous week. We broke down, and a move up to retest that is a possible bearish outcome, and part of what we are describing in here as the rejection, in case that is what we see on the 4-hour playing out. I'm hoping to make another altcoin video later today. Hopefully I'm not gonna have any issues with my computer. If you happen to be based in Newcastle and you see a computer flying out of a window, don't worry, that's just an influencer that couldn't manage to record the video and ended up just talking to the camera for 1 hour, wasting wasting his time. Guys, if you want to trade Bitcoin on a really great exchange, look no further than Bybit. They offer almost all the altcoins that you can think of, not just on spot, but also with contracts, futures, perpetuals. And if you use the link in the description to open your shiny new account, you can claim up to 30,000 in rewards and have the lowest fees to trade, but only when using that link. Now, if you want to go non-KYC and not have to deal with all those approvals and issues depositing and withdrawing, then consider one of my 2 non-KYC exchanges, starting with Bluffing, that is offering a campaign with bonuses for depositing and trading, and the lowest fees to trade, of course, if you use the link in the description. Or alternative, you can also give a try to 2bit with 9k bonus and 40% fee discounts. Both links are in the description. I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.